The night before their wedding, he overheard her laughing on the phone, and what he heard broke him in ways words can't explain. But the decision he made at the altar the next day, it shocked everyone and changed everything. Tony was a very rich man, but you would never guess it by looking at him. He didn't dress in shiny suits or drive loud cars. He liked simple things: a warm cup of coffee in the morning, reading books, and walking in the park. People who knew him often forgot he was a billionaire. He was kind, quiet, and always smiling. But even with all his money, Tony felt something was missing. He was lonely. He had everything money could buy, but he didn't have someone to truly share his life with. All the women he met only cared about his wealth. They wanted his money, not his heart. One evening, while eating alone in a fancy restaurant, Tony met someone who changed everything. Her name was Emily. She walked in wearing a red dress and high heels, looking like she came straight out of a movie. She smiled at Tony and asked if she could sit at his table. Her voice was sweet, and she laughed at all his jokes. Tony was surprised, but he enjoyed the company. They talked for hours that night. Emily seemed so interested in everything he had to say. She said she liked how humble he was. Tony felt seen, really seen for the first time in a long while. They exchanged numbers, and from that night on, they began talking every day. Emily made Tony feel young and excited again. They went out on dates, shared secrets, and laughed a lot. Slowly, Tony started falling in love. His heart told him this was real. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally found someone who loved him for who he was. But what Tony didn't know was that Emily had a secret, a big one. Tony and Emily became close very quickly. Every morning, she sent him sweet messages, and every night, they talked until they both fell asleep on the phone. Tony had never felt this happy before. He told his staff about her, and even his driver noticed he smiled more often. They went on romantic dates, picnics at the park, boat rides, dinner by candlelight. Emily always looked perfect. Her makeup, her hair, her clothes, she knew how to impress. But Tony didn't mind. He thought she was just being herself. Sometimes she asked about his businesses, his cars, and his money. She wanted to know where he invested and how much he made. Tony found it a bit strange, but he told himself she was just curious. After all, she said she loved him, and that was all he wanted to believe. One afternoon, Tony decided to take the big step. He took Emily to meet his parents. They lived in a quiet house away from the city. His mom was a gentle woman who wore simple dresses, and his dad liked farming more than business. When Emily walked in, wearing a sparkly outfit and strong perfume, Tony's mom raised an eyebrow. She gave Emily a polite hug, but whispered to Tony later, "Are you sure about her, son? She seems different." Tony smiled. "She's just stylish, Mom. She makes me happy." After dinner, Tony's father pulled him aside. "She talks a lot about money, Tony. Be careful. Real love doesn't chase gold." But Tony didn't want to listen. He had already made up his mind. He was going to marry Emily. He believed love had finally found him. So, one evening under a sky full of stars, Tony got down on one knee and asked Emily to marry him. She said yes without hesitation. The wedding was just a few days away, and everything was moving fast. Tony had booked the biggest hall in the city. There were flower arrangements, a live band, and hundreds of guests flying in. He didn't care about the cost. All that mattered was that he would soon be married to the woman he loved. Emily looked happy too, or at least that's what Tony thought. She went shopping every day, choosing her wedding dress, shoes, and even planning a grand honeymoon. Tony gave her everything she asked for. He trusted her completely. The night before the wedding, Tony couldn't sleep. He was excited and nervous. He stepped out of his room to take a walk around the house. That was when he heard something that froze him in his tracks. Emily was on the phone in the guest room. She didn't know Tony was nearby. He stood quietly by the door when he heard her laugh. Not the sweet, gentle laugh he was used to, but a loud, mocking one. "I can't believe this is finally happening," she told the person on the phone. "By tomorrow, I'll be married to a billionaire. I'll enjoy his money for a while and then disappear. He has no idea I don't even love him." This was all part of the plan from day one. Tony's heart dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "He's so soft," she continued. "So easy to fool. Remember how we planned that first meeting at the restaurant? Worked like magic." Tony stood there, frozen, his chest tight. The woman he was about to marry had lied to him from the very beginning. Tears filled his eyes, but he quietly walked away, his whole world crashing down in a single night. The next morning was supposed to be the happiest day of Tony's life. The sun was shining, the wedding hall was decorated beautifully, and guests were already arriving, dressed in their finest clothes. Everyone was smiling, except Tony. He hadn't slept a wink. All night he kept hearing Emily's voice in his head. "I'll enjoy his money and disappear?" Her words cut through his heart like a knife. But still he didn't say anything. Not yet. He needed to see her face again, one last time to be sure. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe he had misunderstood. But when Emily walked into the bridal room that morning, she looked too happy, too excited. She wasn't the woman who felt love. She was the woman who had a plan. Tony stood at the altar in his suit, his hands shaking slightly. Emily walked down the aisle in her white dress, smiling at the crowd and pretending like nothing was wrong. When she reached him, she whispered, "We made it, baby." She looked into his eyes, but Tony didn't smile. He didn't say a word. The pastor began the ceremony. "Do you, Tony, take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Tony looked at Emily. He looked at the crowd. His voice was steady, but his heart was breaking. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't do this." Gasps filled the room. Emily blinked in shock. "What are you talking about?" Tony turned to the guests. "Last night, I overheard Emily telling someone on the phone that she was only marrying me for money. That she planned this from the start. That she was going to take everything and run." The room went silent. Emily's face turned red. "Tony, I can explain." But Tony shook his head. "No, you showed me who you are, and now I'm done." He walked out of the hall, leaving behind the woman who broke his heart and the wedding that never was. Tony didn't look back as he walked out of the wedding hall. His heart was shattered, but he felt strangely calm. The woman he thought he would spend his life with had only wanted his money. Everything they had shared was fake. The next day, Tony packed a small bag. He told his staff to cancel all his appointments, shut down his phones, and not tell anyone where he was going. He needed space. He needed to breathe. He got in his car and drove for hours, far from the city, far from the noise, far from the pain. He ended up in a small, peaceful town. It wasn't fancy. The streets were quiet, the people were friendly, and no one knew who he was. For once, he didn't feel like the billionaire. He was just Tony. He rented a simple apartment near a small market. He started visiting the local cafe every morning and taking long walks in the evening. At first, the silence felt heavy, but slowly it started to heal him. One morning, while sitting in the cafe with a cup of tea, a woman walked in. She had short, natural hair, wore a clean, simple dress, and carried a bunch of school books. She smiled gently at the waiter and thanked him softly. Tony couldn't help but notice her. She was nothing like Emily. No flashy makeup, no loud voice, no gold jewelry. Just peace. She sat near him and opened one of her books. After a while, she looked up and said, "You come here a lot." Tony smiled. "Yeah, I like the quiet. My name is Rita," she said. "I'm Tony." They shook hands, and just like that, a new chapter quietly began. Tony and Rita started seeing each other often at the cafe. Sometimes they just smiled and waved. Other times, they talked for hours about simple things, like books, teaching, music, or life in the small town. Rita was a school teacher. She loved working with children and told funny stories about her students. She didn't ask Tony about his job or how much money he made. She just enjoyed his company, and that made Tony feel safe. He didn't tell her he was a billionaire. He wanted to know if she would like him for who he really was, not what he had. One day, Rita asked, "So what brings you to our quiet little town?" Tony paused. "I just needed to rest. Life in the city was too loud." Rita smiled. "Well, I hope you're finding peace here." "I am," he replied softly, looking into her eyes. Days turned into weeks. They went on walks together, shared meals, and sometimes just sat in silence, watching the sunset. Tony felt different around Rita. He didn't have to pretend. He didn't have to worry. She made him feel calm and whole again. One rainy evening, Rita invited him to the school's local fundraiser. The hall was small and filled with kids, parents, and laughter. Tony helped set up chairs and serve drinks. No one treated him special. He wasn't a billionaire here, just a man with kind eyes and a helpful hand. After the event, they walked home under one umbrella. Tony held it above them, and Rita giggled as the rain splashed at their feet. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "No, thank you," Tony replied, "for being real." He was falling in love again, but this time it was different. It wasn't fast or flashy. It was slow, gentle, and real. Tony knew he couldn't keep the truth from Rita forever. She had shown him kindness, honesty, and real love, something he never thought he'd find again. And now, he wanted to give her his whole heart, but that also meant showing her his whole life. One quiet afternoon, they sat together on a wooden bench in the town park. Birds chirped in the trees, and the wind was soft. Tony held her hand and looked into her eyes. "Rita, there's something I need to tell you," he said. She turned to him, calm and curious. "Okay, what is it?" "I haven't been completely honest about who I am," he began slowly. "Before I came to this town, I lived in the city. I'm actually very wealthy, a billionaire, to be exact." Rita blinked, surprised, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I left the city because I was hurt," Tony continued. "I was going to marry someone who only wanted me for my money. I found out the truth the night before the wedding, so I ran. I needed to start over." Rita was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled softly. "You're still Tony, the same man who helped carry boxes at the fundraiser, the man who laughs at my silly stories, the one who listens, who cares." Tony's eyes filled with tears. "You're not angry?" She shook her head. "No, you didn't lie to hurt me. You were protecting your heart. And now, you've trusted me with it." Tony felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly free. "I love you, Rita." He whispered. "I love you too," she replied. That evening, Tony asked Rita to marry him, not with a diamond ring or fancy words, but with his heart open wide. And she said yes. Tony and Rita had a small wedding in the town's tiny chapel. There were no cameras, no gold decorations, no famous guests. Just a few neighbors, some of Rita's students holding flowers, and two hearts full of love. Rita wore a simple white gown and flat shoes. Tony wore a plain suit and the biggest smile he had ever worn in his life. As they exchanged vows, everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a wedding. It was healing. It was peace. It was real. After the ceremony, they had cake and danced under the open sky. The stars were shining, and so were their eyes. There was no loud music, just laughter and joy. A few weeks later, Tony told Rita he was ready to go back to the city, but this time with her by his side. "I left that place broken," he told her, "but I'm going back whole with you." Rita held his hand and nodded. "Let's go home." They moved into Tony's quiet mansion on the edge of the city. The staff welcomed Rita with love and respect. She brought warmth to the house, adding fresh flowers, books for the children in the neighborhood, and even helping Tony start a charity to support single mothers and teachers. People in the city were surprised to see Tony back, and even more surprised that he had returned with a woman so gentle, so humble, and so kind. He didn't care what anyone thought. He had learned a powerful lesson. True love doesn't care about money. It sees the heart. And sometimes, to find that kind of love, you have to lose everything first. Tony and Rita lived simply, peacefully, and happily. And every time Tony looked at her, he smiled, because love didn't betray him, it saved him. The end. Thanks so much for watching till the end. If you're a returning subscriber, I truly appreciate your love and support. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, so you'll join our community. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and drop a comment below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.